Well, folks, I'm going to get that in focus here. It's fly tying time, and we're going to do a tube fly. Before I talk about the fly, all you non-fly tiers, don't panic. I would recommend, because I need the views, follow through, watching it. I'm going to talk about how I construct these flies, which will give you a little clue on when you're buying flies, what to look for. And on the end, I'm going to rig this thing up and show you how I rig it up to fish it. But about the fly, it's a tube fly, and it's actually a tube fly that I brought back from fishing the Skeena River in Terrace, British Columbia, with Darren and Missy from the Steelhead house. Great operation, great couple, quite inexperienced fishing that big giant river. But this was a fly that was very successful up there, and had a lot of good luck. And I brought back here, and tried it out this past fall and for steelhead and salmon, and both the Chinook salmon and the steelheads found this fly very attractive. In fact, some of the Chinooks, the eats we got on these things are best described more as a mugging, not an eat. So there's actually, they took them so hard they were breaking us off on a take even with a 15-pound tippet. But anyways, I'm going to tie this fly, and as I tie it, I'll talk about how I build it and why I do what I do. So anyways, I'm going to reposition the camera so all you see is my hands and the fly. And I'm going to put this fly together. In the comments, I got a list of materials. If I get ambitious enough, I'll put a list of materials on the video, but I'll print or type out a list of materials in the comments so that anyone want to tie this fly can come down and take a look at it. And obviously, I'll be talking about the materials as I tie it. Okay, we're now on my hand model, for what it's worth. Obviously, here's the fly. This is a couple of quick things on the tools that I use. Get the fly out of the pin here. There we go. These pins can sometimes get these tubes pretty tight. This right here, what I'm working on, is a simple HMH tube fly vise, and it just goes into your jaws right here. And here I'm actually using a it's a Regal jaw. It's actually the saltwater jaw, so it's got a nice little gap, and it sits in here and holds really secure. I've tried a lot of different tube flying vices, and this is probably the most convenient one I've found. I tie a lot of tubes on these things, and it's been, of everything I've tried, it's been about the same. In this case here, I'm using the HMH some tubes. Your tubes come in a lot of different things and a lot of different sizes, but I'm going to prep this thing up here, so just give me a minute to get set up and I'll show you how I prep it. Go ahead. This right here is an 1.5 inch tube, and whoops. And since I'm tying this this tube fly for winter fishing conditions, since it is winter, so basically I'm going to tie this a little smaller, a little bit more sparser. I want to shorten this tube up, so I'm going to just kind of come, and this is a 1/8 tube, by the way, so I like the thinner tubes. I don't like the fatter ones. They just kind of seem to end up taking up a lot of space. So I just cut that thing off, come back, collect up the pin that I'm going to be using, or the needle as they call it, and I'm going to slide it on the needle. Now right here you can see that since I cut off the flare, I got to reflare it. So I'm going to just kind of get that little bit of metal out just a little bit, because if I don't do that, when I melt it back, it'll close up, and just a little bit of heat. As soon as I see that start to curdle back, I'll just stop. There we are. And just roll around, give it a second, and she'll just, as soon as that goes from a clear to a glossy to kind of a cloudy look, you know, the tube is cooled down, or the plastic is cooled down. And since I left the wire out, which you can see right there, I know that the hole's not plugged. So I'll just slide it up to the little elbow here and then load it into the vise. Make sure she's locked in. And get that a little more square to me, and square it to the camera. There we go. Now it's just general fly tying. I am working with some black-aught thread. Generally it's 6/0, not black-aught, 6/0 black thread. Now really quick here, you'll note that you'll see a gap between the thread and the back of the tube. I do leave this little area clear right here. Come back up, and grab some. In this case, I'm using it's a large embossed, or I don't know, kind of a multicolored silver tinsel. I like this kind of rainbowish silver tinsel. And I use a large just because it can go on a little bit quicker, and everything else tie right along the length of the tube here, get it secure, and this will be the body of the fly. I'll just kind of butt wrap that up. Squeaky noises off my fingers. At least it ain't squeaky noises off my chair. For those of you who watch a lot of my videos, my chair doesn't make the normal squeaky noise everybody complains about. I got a different chair. Alright, now I just wrap back down onto the body just a little bit just to secure everything. So now I got a little bit of tinsel over the tube body. Obviously, it's even more obvious the gap that I left here. This will become obvious later on when I show you how I set the fly up. Now for the kind of the wing on this, this is a Seafoam blue. Basically, it's a Flashabou that I use for the wing. And I got a fair amount of it to save time, a fair amount of this sorted out. So I'll just cut off a gob. Normally, if I was tying this for spring or fall high water or fall Chinooks, I'd use a little bit more material. Since this is being tied from winter steelhead, I'm using a little less. I fold it over once. I'll come up, cut it. Then what I'm going to do is kind of split the difference in the center of that. And there we go, kind of about a half a tube length. Just kind of eyeball what my hang off is going to be. But it's usually about, not quite, just a little more than half over the back. And I don't worry about it being square. I like it a little off square. Take the rest, fold it over, tie back onto it. Now it looks a little straight. And what we want to do is get that a little unkept. Get in here the fingernails, and it kind of gives it a little curlies. Now what I like to do for contrast is I'm going to use this purple dyed grizzly hackle stuff, and it's a whiting project, and it's got these beautiful long hackles. So I'm going to put a couple of these on kind of on this side, and I'll have it just a little bit out past the flashy stuff. Easy, easy. And here we go, right back there. Tie it on the side. And there we are. And come back, clip off the leftovers. And now, so this will do the wing. Now I'm going to put a collar on this. And what I need to do is to support this collar so when it's fishing it doesn't collapse. I'm going to put about a, oops, get my Maribou out of the way because I'm using Maribou for the collar. I'm going to use a little bit of, and this is large Metallica black estaz. Why am I using large Metallica black estaz? Because I like the large for the size because it makes a nice little bulge or a shoulder. And I'm using black because I got lots of it, and it just kind of will to be a natural blend to the color of the collar. This material's get out of the way, a little bit of saliva helps. And all we need is just, don't get carried away. There's one turn, two turns. That's it. That's more than enough. Sometimes one is all you need. I'm probably running out of room here, starting to crowd up a little bit. Get my tips of my scissors in here and just kind of work the fly down a little bit, wind back on it. And so now I got enough room here to get a room of Maribou. And this is some blood quill Maribou. I'm going to just kind of cut up a little bit, get rid of this into the little softer part of the stem. I only need about 2 turns of this stuff, so my fingernail in here, collapse that stem a little bit. That makes it wind a little easier. If you run your fingernail over stiffer stems, it collapses it. It's kind of hollow and it makes them a little bit more flexible. And I'm going to cheat. I'm going to get in here with my hackle pliers. There's one turn. Take a minute. So lick my fingers, groom it back, groom back the Maribou a little bit. Second turn, groom it back. It looks a little light, but I want it light because I want the blue Flashabou to look through the collar. Right now it looks a little rough, almost like somebody hit a cat with a cattle prod. We got hair and fuzz in all directions, but that'll groom itself into place in a minute. Secure that. Little trick is it's a little out of control. See how I hold it back with my one finger, take my other hand, a couple turns back and forth like that, and it just lays right down. Now I like to put what I call a second collar or a nose collar on. In this case it's some guinea fowl. One is I get a contrast, a model of it, so we got some breaks in the color scheme, because not all things in nature are the same color. And so I like to have some variations in the shades and the colors. But this guinea's kind of tough, so it'll actually protect the front of that Maribou. And we'll just kind of prep it like we do any other bit of hackle. Secure it on. Here again, we're not going to get a lot. All we need is a couple of turns. One turn. Two turns. Hey, we're going to get a third one. It's a good piece. Get in there right behind that little flare on the tube. Get your thread tucked in behind that. Once again, take your fingers, fold back all the fibers, wind down things. A little bit of a wiggle back and forth. And at this point, I'm going to grab the whip finish and finish off the fly. This basically finishes the fly off. So you can see how it kind of comes into its own. We didn't over hackle the back of it. Kind of get my hand right here, you can see. So that way all the colors of the fly and all the movement kind of comes through. A quick tip: when you're tying large flies or you're looking to buy large flies, make sure they're not overdressed. Have a tendency to put a lot of material on these larger flies, so as a result, you get too much material, it kills the action and the fishability and how the fly swims. It's just too much stuff on them. They just go through the water like a gob of leaves. If they're a little skimpy and look a little bit underdressed or a little light, they fish better, they sink, they swim better, you get a lot more life to the flies. Alright, I'm going to reset the camera here in a minute and get a couple things here, and I'm going to show how I rig it. Alright, as promised, how we rig these things up. Obviously, being a couple of things with these things, with these tube flies. The first thing is when we're tying it, I talked about this little gap left behind the fly right here off the tip of the scissors. But what we do is you get this junction tube, this plastic soft surgical tubing, that slides over this bump in the back of the fly like so, and that acts as a junction tube. And usually what I do is I cut that off about 3/8 of an inch. I find sometimes I've gone a 1/2 inch when I wanted to have the hook hang way back. So when I'm fishing, I'll actually carry a little fishing tip with these tubes, carry a little chunk of this tube here, because one is sometimes these tubes fall off these flies and get lost. Second thing is you might want to say, hey, these fish are nipping the tails of the flies and I'm getting a lot of short strikes or just a lot of pulls and nothing here, and I need to get the hook on the fly. Instead of having it right in here, move it back into here. And one of the tricks I like to do is just pull off this, get everything out of the way here, pull off this junction tube that comes with it and just put a new tube on with a little bit more room so the hook is not free swinging. That's why I've been liking these tubes over shank flies. Get all my materials out of the way here so I can make a cut. I like the way that tubes hold your flies in place, but in this case about 3/8 of an inch out. I'll just make a cut there. Now the fly has its tube to hold the hook, and here again, quick word, the reason why I've been going to tube flies over shanks is the fact that with the shank fly, that fly's often wire braid and it's just flea flopping around in there. We get a lot of bad hookups. With the tubes, we get a lot of solid hookups because the hook is more stable and anchored in there. For hooks, I'm using two different things. These are Gamakatsu's twos. I use these, what do they say? Yeah, twos. I use a lot of these for Chinooks. But my favorite hooks are these Daiichis. It's a 2557. This is a 4. They're a little bit smaller than the hook size sets. And Steelhead have a tendency to come up behind the fly and then just kind of nip at it. With a smaller hook, they'll get their mouth around it and you get a good hook up. So now I'll show you how I set these things up. We're going to do a little bit of pretending. This is 20 pound. I don't use 20 pound. I use 12 or 15, sometimes 10, depending on how the fish are behaving, as my tippet. But anyways, for video purposes, I'm using the heavier stuff so you can see what I'm doing. I'll just run my tippet to the front of the fly, string it through, bring it out the back, not worry about the fly. And in this case, I'm going to use this big Gamogatsu size 2 so you can see what I'm going on. I'll use my favorite tie up the fly knot. In this case, that Jay's knot, but it's in one of my videos there. So if you ever wonder about this knot, there is a video for it in the tip section, I think. And then I'll bring that up, come up, and I am actually a little bit organized. I got a pair of nippers right here. Clean off the tag, and then come back, collect up the fly, bring it down to the hook, get a hold of the hook eye slides inside the tube, and then it comes up against the back, and everything in there is nice and get in here where you can see it here. Everything is nice and stable. You can see the hook right in there. Get the fly organized without jabbing myself. You can see how the hook's kind of in the back of the fly there. Yes, this is a 2. This is what I use for salmon fishing, but with the 4 being a little bit smaller, if they're a little nippy, they'll get their mouth around the gap of the hook. Sometimes they'll actually just bite around the hook here and you'll never get the iron on them. Where if you have a smaller thing, they'll get their mouth around it and then you get a really good hook up on them. And I've gone down as small as 6s. So if they're really nippy, I'll drop down to 6s. That's another advantage with the tube flies is we can quite often tailor the hook for the behavior of the fish. If they're just flat out aggressive and just crushing the entire fly, just come up eating the whole thing, it doesn't matter. Put a 2 on, get a good solid hook. If they're nipping, you may have to drop down to a 4 or 6. So that's how I rig them. And that's the nice thing about that is I can carry a little plastic tube full of variety of hooks, and I can just change out as needed. The other nice thing is you get a fish on, the fly kind of gets away from the fish, and the flies don't get as chewed up. So quite often you don't have, the flies can survive a lot of fish by being just sliding out of the way on the tubes. And of course we can then, like I said earlier, we can adjust the hooks to the fish behavior, and we get really good hookups on these tubes. So that's how I set it up. That's how I run it. As for what I do for a space setup, there's a whole bunch of tip videos on how I set up my spay rods, and I might even have a few more tips coming along. So that's the fly. So I hope you found it useful, a little bit entertaining. I hope you non-fly tiers found a couple cool tips on setting them up and what to look for a fly. If you'd like to see some other flies tied, please leave them down in the comments. We're always looking for suggestions for flies to tie. And hit the like button, and do me a favor, of our fly time videos are not as popular as our fishing videos and tip videos, so share it amongst your buddies so we can create a larger following in the fly tying, and we can do more fly tying for you fly tiers. As for you non-fly tiers, share it, tell everybody, and just tell me what other little tips you'd like to see, and I'll incorporate them in for you. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit the like button, and see you on the water, folks. This is Jay at JPEG Guides and Lost River Fishing. We are a year-round fly fishing catch and release guide service. We fish the Lake Ontario tributaries, and then during the spring and the summer we also fish the inland trout streams, classic dry fly fishing. During the heat of the summer we will do the warm water fishing for bass and pike. If you're interested in any of our outings or have any questions, please feel free to email us at fish@lostriversfishing.com. Hope to hear from you, and if you have any questions, feel free to contact us.